On this edition of The Best Times, you'll get grandparenting advice from an expert. You'll ride with boomer bikers who are pedaling to stay healthy. We'll examine the devastating record flood of 1937, and you'll get valuable information about long-term care insurance. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you. Hello, I'm Chris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. Becoming a grandparent is one of life's rites of passage. You look forward to the joy of welcoming a new member of the family and swell with pride as you watch your children become parents. But being a grandparent means adjusting to a new way of life. Are boomers ready to be called Meemaw and Pawpaw? Maybe you should take a class in Grandparenting 101. At the Women's Pavilion of Methodist Hospital in Germantown, a group of expectant grandparents gather for a 2-hour class called the Grandparent Connection. Registered nurse Kathy Aiken is the class instructor. With her help, these grandparents-to-be will be ready to welcome a new family member. The class provides a refresher course for the basics, like holding a newborn, but it also dives deeply into how much things have changed since Grandma and Grandpa were parents. To find out more about those changes, I invited Kathy to our studio. What is the role, or should the role, of grandparent be? I think, we all know the job description of being a parent, but maybe we don't know the job description of being a modern grandparent. What is it?
Well, today I think grandparenting is changing just because, number one, we're more engaged in what's going on because more parents are working outside the home, so they become caregivers. I think also we have to step back because young people have waited later in life to have children, and they're professionals in themselves, so they have a plan that they want to execute, and you have to play with their plan, not the plan that you think as a grandparent and how you parented.
So it's not so easy, is it? I mean, being a modern grandparent, it's not like our grandparents.
No.
Times have changed, right?
Right. What I see, and I've been teaching this for a while now, is the grandparents, they're so excited. I mean, we have reveal grandparent parties. We have reveal, when they find out the sex or whether it's multiples or whatever, but their role of coming in, is just, I don't know how to explain it. It's, they're just so much more engaged in that life than I think like my own grandparents were. I mean, yes, my parents would carry me over to their house, but now it's like a party at our hospital when the baby's coming. The grandparents have a picnic basket. They stay through the whole labor, the induction, and everything. So it's a different time in how they want to be involved in that birth.
Yeah, times indeed have changed,
Yes,
I guess,
yes.
in that respect. Parties, yeah. But I guess that's the effect of, having a kid, welcoming a new member of the family is a big deal, isn't it?
It is. It's a life change.
It is a life-changing
It's a life
event.
change.
Is it hard for grandparents to accept the role of not being in charge all of a sudden?
I think it's definitely hard for them to be, not to have that say-so. And some of them still will voice their opinion, and there would be conflict, between especially like the son-in-law or, when it's their daughter, it's a little bit different, I think. Because that bond, if she's actually had the baby, she's probably already voiced her opinions even before the baby come because that connection is there. But when it's a mother-in-law, voicing opinions, it can be a little different there.
Yeah, it should.
Because they think they should have just as much control because that's my son that had the baby, but,
Well, in that area, I mean, should grandparents give advice or should we just sort of, lay back, keep our mouth shut?
Well, I think we need to listen to the parents because they are the parents. They're the ones that are going to be there 24/7. But I think our advice is still good. And you know, as a grandparent myself and parent, the words I love hearing is, gosh, Mom, you really did know what you were talking about. You know, you love hearing that. You know,
yeah, those are the moments you live for.
Because sometimes some of the things we have did work, and you know, it's good, but they've got to be the parents.
Let's talk about the boomer generation a little bit, which of course is a whole topic here. But as boomers, I think as a generation, we've always been very active. Are boomer grandparents going to be different grandparents than our grandparents?
I think they are, because we are a very busy group of people. You know, we're just always engaging in different activities, and we want to take the little ones and we want them to at least hear some of the things that we used to do, but we want to be able to do. We're grandparents now go to the ball games, they're at everything that's participating. My grandparents really didn't do that, because they just, you know, maybe had one car and they didn't, you know, go to things like that. It was just, but now, I mean, grandparents are at everything. They've got the shirt that says, you know, I'm so-and-so's child, or you know, whatever. So I think they're different. They don't like being the term grandparent in a sense of, I'm not grandma or grandmother. I want to be Gigi or Lala or, you know, somebody like that. Well, they don't
along that line. I mean, boomers have always denied aging. I mean, I think we don't want to be called old, right. But all of a sudden we have the term grandparent attached to us. Doesn't that make them feel old? Is that a psychological hurdle?
It probably does, you know, but I think once they lay their eyes on that grandchild, they don't care about that part anymore.
Can there be issues between competing sets of grandparents?
Yes, you know, you see that, especially if the one grandparent may live close and versus the other one live away, where they're not always involved. There's this competition of, well, they got to spend the night at your house and they don't get to come to my house. Or, you know, especially I think sometimes with the role the father's parents aren't always included in everything. However, you know, if they live close, it's kind of hard, you know. I feel like the moms and the dads, the new parents, probably are the ones who suffer, because they try to be equal with the time, but, you know, we might fight over that.
Well, they're caught in the middle, of course, but aren't they the ones that actually have to control that kind of situation?
They are.
I mean, they have to step in and take charge.
And it's good. We always tell them to set those boundaries. We teach childbirth class to set those boundaries early on, especially then there won't be drama when the baby comes. So.
In your classes, what are the big concerns that your class participants have when they walk in the door? What are the questions they ask you?
I think with especially the grandmothers, you know, the female role part in there, they want to know how they can help the mom the most. You know, is she going to need certain things, you know, because they hear so much in the news about, you know, postpartum depression and things like that. They don't want those triggers to come to them. And about feeding, how can they help? Because now she's wanting, you know, to breastfeed the baby, and I can't do that, and, you know, what can I do? So I think the changes that have happened too, you know, as far as caring for a newborn, you know, we put them on the backs, they have car seats, you know, how we care for them. They want to know that. How do I take care of them and help this new family, you know, or help my daughter or son with this new baby? That's their biggest concerns.
So let's close out with your best advice. What's the best advice for you to give to an expectant grandparent or a new grandparent?
Well, to be patient and be listening, and then just be there to support them in however the parents want to use your support, because we can be overbearing sometimes and be not welcome maybe, but I think probably by week 2 they're going to be happy to see any support they can get after the realization of getting up and down every hour and a half for a couple of weeks. But just to be supportive and patient as the new parents adjust, as we had to adjust to what it's like to be a new parent.
Great. Thank you, Kathy, for being on The Best Times.
All right. Thank you for having us.
Bike riding isn't just for kids anymore. In fact, the number of kids riding bikes actually declined in the last decade, while the baby boomers have grown to become about 1/3 of the biking population. And here in Memphis, the Green Line, trails, and bike paths have inspired people to get back on the bike, in some cases for the first time in 30 or 40 years. Let's take a look at this latest trend of boomer biking. On a midsummer's evening, a group of cyclists gather outside the Peddler Bike Shop for the weekly Tuesday beginner's ride. They'll ride from the University of Memphis area to Overton Park and back, a distance of about 10 miles. Hal Mabry, owner of the Peddler, has seen more boomers come back to biking recently.
Yes, we've been noticing that for a few years. People wanting to get busy, get off the couch, early retirement, and get active again.
Gary Wyndham is a 61-year-old former runner who came back to biking a few years ago because he was looking for an exercise that was less stressful on his body.
You're pounding your body, and the older you get, you say, well, maybe I don't need to do this as much. But yeah, I think with the biking, I see a lot more older people.
As Hal Mabry points out, the exercise benefits of biking serve the health needs of older riders.
You get your heart rate up, get your blood pumping. It can help fight diabetes, easier on the joints than running and even walking. You can go farther, see more stuff on a bicycle than you can on your feet.
Robin Boyd came back to biking 2 years ago at age 57, after 30 years off the bike. For him, the health rewards of cycling go beyond the physical benefits.
The benefit of being in the moment. You're on a bike, you're not worried about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. You're thinking about what's happening right now. And it takes you away from other obstacles or distractions, and you're able to concentrate on the moment.
And for the cyclists gathering for the Peddler's Tuesday ride, there is yet another benefit of biking: socialization.
As we move into our 50s, the riding has provided an opportunity to expand that friend group, that friend set. I think it's sharpened my mind. It's that expansion. We always have to be learning new things. Always being exposed to new experiences. And there's not a better way to do that than a good interaction with good people, or like-minded people.
Modern bicycle shops like the Peddler have an enormous selection of bikes to fit the needs of riders of all ages. Choosing a bike can be overwhelming, but fitting the bike to the rider's style of riding is important.
Well, I want them to feel secure and comfortable on the bicycle. And I'll ask what type of riding they want to do. A lot of times it's pull around my neighborhood or ride the Green Line. And then I want to find a bike that's stable, that's not, doesn't have them perched up high where they don't have good control, the one that's a little closer to the ground.
For older riders coming back into biking, Hal recommends a cruiser bike.
The electric cruisers are the first bike I'll go to, and that is a foot forward position on the bike so that you're pedaling out in front of you, similar to a recumbent. And then when you drop a foot, you're more likely to get your foot flat on the ground and get stability.
There are road bikes designed for riding on pavement, mountain bikes for riding on trails, and hybrids that can adapt to a wide variety of terrain. There are bikes like this one that put the rider in a comfortable chair. And there are even three-wheel bikes for people with balance issues. You can spend anywhere from a few $100 to several $1,000s. Memphis now has over 100 miles of bike lanes, bike paths, and trails, including the Green Line, which stretches from Midtown to Shelby Farms, with plans to extend it all the way to Cordova. It's one of the reasons Memphis was named the most improved city for cycling in 2012 by Bicycling Magazine.
I think my first introduction to the Green Line was here at Mullins Station, and moving west over the bridges, over the, I guess it's the Wolf River bottoms. You can get into it on a bike or on foot and not even realize that you're here in Memphis.
Whether you're riding the Green Line or just pedaling around your neighborhood, Robin Boyd has some words of wisdom for boomer bikers.
The soul of biking is not how fast you go or how far you go, but the ride itself.
If you want more information about biking in and around Memphis, go to the website of BikePed Memphis. Some of you watching will remember January of 1937 when the rains came and didn't stop until parts of 31 states were underwater. Here, the Mississippi River crested at over 48 feet, a record that still stands today. Memphis became an island of refuge for tens of thousands left homeless by the flooding. Historian Patrick O'Daniel records the human drama in his book, Memphis and the Superflood of 1937.
Tremendous rainstorms hit the Ohio and Mississippi valleys January 1st of 1937 and caused tremendous flooding in both valleys at the same time. Cities like Cincinnati and Louisville completely flooded and had to be evacuated.
Flooding stretched all along the Ohio and Mississippi valleys, from West Virginia to Louisiana. More than 21 inches of rain fell in January of 1937, and over 8 million acres of land were underwater, creating what one newspaper called a lake the size of Ireland. 1.5 million people were affected by this disaster, and Memphis became a refuge for thousands.
At one point in February of 37, 1 in 5 people in Memphis was a refugee. So we had between 50 and 60,000 refugees come through Memphis in about a month period. One family in particular I can think of that the water came up through the floorboards. The husband runs out, hooks up the mules to the wagon, gets his wife, gets his kids out in there, and by this point the water's up to the wheels. They get about a mile down the road and the hooves of the mules are no longer touching the ground. The wheels aren't touching the ground either. And the only thing keeps them from sinking below the waves is the momentum of the mules swimming towards the levee. People got out with basically their clothes on their backs. A lot of them traveled to Memphis on foot. So they're cold, wet, and of course sick. So once they got to Memphis, they had to be quarantined. The first thing the city did was to close down the fairgrounds and use the fairgrounds amusement park as a refugee camp. National Guardsmen came in, and other volunteers built additional barracks to house the refugees that were coming in. And there were over 1,000 of them coming in a day. Once the fairgrounds filled to capacity, the city shut down all the schools, and all the schools were used as hospitals.
8,000 refugees were hospitalized and cared for by the Red Cross and volunteers from the Memphis medical community. Even by today's standards, it's amazing how quickly and efficiently the city was able to act in this crisis, and how generously people opened up their hearts and their wallets.
When people would give money, the donations were listed in the newspaper, in the commercial appeal, the name and how much money they gave. And you saw people like Boss Crump or some big business owners give, large amounts of money. But you go down the list all the way to the end, and there are children giving change to help out. And it's remarkable how much money was raised, not just locally, but across the whole country for this. Keep in mind, this is 1937. This is the depths of the Depression. And people were still giving everything they possibly could. And it took almost no time at all for them to organize and get started.
In spite of the generosity of Memphians, life in the camps wasn't comfortable.
The buildings that were used to house the refugees weren't really made for housing refugees. I mean, the cattle barn was not a place for people. The automobile building wasn't really a place for people. But volunteers from the Red Cross and Memphians who came in to help out did the best they could. The city provided entertainment. There were different musical acts that came through. At one point, a circus came through to entertain the kids. Church groups came in, people sang songs, watched movies, things like that. But Memphians did what they could to make the refugees as comfortable as possible.
In the midst of this disaster, E.H. Crump took issue with the way Mayor Watkins Overton was handling the recovery. So the boss took charge.
Crump personally led flood control efforts on the Nonconnah Creek. So he'd stayed out there night and day, directing people, say, here, take the steam shovel over there, you guys move sandbags over there. He took it upon himself to do it. And yes, that did cause friction with the mayor, because the mayor was saying, we've already taken care of this, you really don't need to be doing this. So there were some problems there. It's like, well, who's really running the city? And by the end of the flood, it was plainly clear that it was Boss Crump.
2 years later, Crump was elected mayor for the third time. He was sworn in, promptly resigned, and turned the reins over to his protege, Walter Chandler. On February 18th, the flooding ended, and the storm-weary refugees slowly began to return to what was left of their homes. The exact number of flood-related deaths remains unclear, but the flood left over $3 billion in damage in its wake, prompting the federal government to beef up flood control along the Ohio River and in Memphis. When the Mississippi River began to rise again in 2011 to near record levels, the flood control measures held the waters in check. But as Patrick O'Daniel notes, we have an uneasy truce with Old Man River.
We know that we've developed these areas that used to be runoff for the Mississippi River, all these swamplands and stuff like that that used to absorb all the floods. Well, the river doesn't know that. So we basically had this very loose truce with the river. The river will come back and claim that land, and it often does.
A catastrophic illness that requires long-term medical care can decimate an individual's finances. A private room in a skilled nursing home in Tennessee costs an average of nearly $73,000 per year. Statistics show that 70% of people over 65 will need some type of long-term care in their lives. Long-term care insurance has been on the market for almost 4 decades, but only about 8 million people have purchased these policies. Should you? Here's some basic information about long-term care insurance to help you make your decision. What is long-term care insurance?
If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with a long-term illness or a chronic condition, what long-term care insurance can do for you is provide the financial resources you need to help pay for those costs, which can be steep.
Doesn't Medicare cover long-term care?
Generally speaking, it's not. Medicare will only cover what they consider to be medically necessary skilled nursing care, whether it be done in a facility or at home. There are some policies out there, the Medicare Advantage policies, that will potentially pay for some of that care, but if that happens, you're generally responsible for some of the costs as well.
What is covered in a long-term care policy?
Some of the original policies only covered skilled care inside of a nursing home, but we've had to broaden that definition over the years. And so today's policies will cover a wide range of custodial type care, whether that's provided inside the home, inside of an assisted living facility, or in a skilled situation like a nursing home.
What is the best age to buy a long-term care policy?
So there really is no ultimate best age per se to buy a long-term care policy. What I can tell you is that it's generally less expensive the younger that you are. And as I just mentioned, in terms of the health qualification, each year that you decide to wait is another opportunity for you to become uninsurable. So I would encourage you to take a moment to step back and look at your financial picture and determine when and if it makes sense for you to purchase it.
Are there dollar limits to coverage and deductibles that must be met?
Yes, there are dollar limits on the policy. Generally speaking, when you purchase the policy, you're going to opt for a certain number of dollars per day or per month, and for a certain number of months or days. As far as the deductible is concerned, we do have a deductible in the policy, and in our world that's referred to as the elimination period. And it simply refers to the number of days that you have to pay for your own care before the policy would reimburse the cost that you are incurring.
What is the average cost of a policy?
It's hard to give an answer to that question because no two individuals' financial situations are exactly the same, and what we try to do is tailor the policies to their particular situation. What I can tell you is that, again, it's generally less expensive the younger that you are. Policies with bigger benefits typically cost more.
For more information about long-term care insurance, contact a financial advisor. Want more information about life after 50? Go to our website, wkno.org/besttimes, and send us your feedback and story ideas to besttimes@wkno.org. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. Please join us next week for more stories about life after 50. Until then, I'm Chris Hardaway. Thanks for watching. Good night. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you.